My name is Susanna. I lead community at Plain, and I am really, really glad that you're joining us today. Rob and I have a lot of topics that we want to cover, but I do want to do a little bit of quick housekeeping just before we get into it. We are recording this session, so if you have to drop at any point or you want to share this, tomorrow, the other day with someone on your team, feel free to do that. You're going to get the recording in your inbox in the next couple of days or so. You can also drop your questions in the Q&A on the right side of your screen as we go. I'm going to be watching them, and we're going to save the last few minutes for Q&A. We should have about 45 minutes together. Lots of good stuff coming up. So let's just get into it. I think that most of us here aren't lacking AI tools right now. Like, we're actually drowning in them. And so what was new last week is old this week. And the question really isn't, should we be using AI in support anymore? It's more so, how do we actually decide what matters? Where do humans actually still belong? Where do we fit, right? And that's why I'm so excited to have Rob here with us. Rob's team at n8n has built a support operation that handles about 60% of their tickets with AI. And they've done this while still growing the support team 5 times. And both of these things, were true at the same time. And that's not usually the story that most companies are telling, but it is the one that I wanted you to hear. And so with that, let me introduce Rob. Rob has been with n8n for about a year now. He manages the support engineering team. But a fun fact about Rob is that he was an n8n power user way before he was an employee, right? And so he came in as one of the first people on the support team. And that team has now grown 5 times, as I mentioned. And n8n itself is one of the fastest growing companies in Europe with more than 800 employees across the world. So I'm so excited to have Rob here. Rob, welcome. So happy to have you. I'd love to talk a little bit about your background. So you were using n8n long before joining, right? So I want to start here because I think that it sets up a lot of what we're going to talk about. What was that path like from, user to power user to the person now scaling the support team behind it?
Yeah, so first off, thank you for having me today, Susanna. The experience for me for n8n is a long-lasting journey. A couple of years before I even came to the team, I was working on another business venture with a couple other gentlemen, and we had already done a lot of different automations using, traditional fashions, Python scripts, JavaScripts, web automation platforms, things like that. And we were really looking for a way to standardize it and make it a little bit more scalable, a little bit more friendly, a little bit more easier for other people to manage, right? And so we went down this rabbit hole of finding tools like Zapier and Make and, n8n and all of these different things. And it wasn't until I found n8n that it really just, clicked on a light for me, right? So, it was open source. It was, I could self-host it. I could do these crazy implementations of these workflows that I wasn't able to accomplish anywhere else. And I got addicted, right? And it was incredible. It made things a lot easier to scale. It made a lot more approachable. And then swiftly after starting to use the product, they implemented AI into the product. And when that happened, it just expanded it that much more, right? And then eventually I, left that business venture and was doing my own thing for a while and noticed n8n had an opportunity in America. So I decided to apply with them, and thankfully they were willing enough to take me along with them, right? Part of that journey was really incredible because I actually got to be a user with giving feedback from a community perspective to n8n before I joined the team, right? And then I actually got to work on their evaluations feature as a user testing. So I got to do all that kind of stuff in that interim time. And then joining the team, it kind of just felt like a natural extension, right? And so we started, like you said, as a smaller cohort of people on the support team. And I started as a senior engineer, quickly went into management, and we've just been growing nonstop with these huge visions of what the future is going to look like with us and AI and how we're just going to continue to scale and expand. So that's a little bit about the experience so far.
Wow, I mean, it's amazing. It's such a good lens, I think, to start from, right? Like you've been literally seeing this product as a builder, as a customer, someone now who is also building the team and the tool, the product, right? So like not many people are getting all of these three angles. It's like it's very unique and very rare. I remember speaking with Walter, the head of customer experience at n8n about a year and a half ago, and just asking him like, how do you hire? And something he said that stuck with me was, I like to hire from the n8n community. And here it is, like this is proof of what Walter was saying back then, which I absolutely love. So I also want to kind of like set the scene a little bit before we go into the AI piece, because I think what's really interesting about n8n is, you guys are building a product that is automation, as you said, that is AI. But the human element of it is still growing. Like the team has still been growing while the AI is being built. And that's not the story that most companies are telling right now. So when you joined, one of the first 6 or 7 people in the support team, today the team is 30 plus, still growing, right? So seeing as this is against the grain as what most companies are saying about AI and support right now, like how is n8n thinking about hiring? Like what's actually driving that hiring growth at n8n?
Oh, because we do see what the future is, and it's not about eliminating people from using AI. It's about enhancing people with AI, right? It's a different mindset than what, like you said, a lot of what's being seen out there. These massive layoffs with technology companies and things like that. But that's not our approach. Our approach is to take these tools and to put them in the hands of people who are subject matter experts in what they do already day to day, and make them even more incredible, and then enhance the AI with these incredible people and make them even more productive, make the AI more productive. And it's just, that's the simplest way that we say it. We just continue to enhance people.
So AI isn't actually reducing the work, it's just changing the kind of work that's left.
Oh, absolutely. It's taken a lot of the mundane stuff that these guys have done and automated that for them, right? It's taken a lot
Yeah.
of communication and made it easier for them as well. I'll show at the end of the our demonstration. I'll show you a couple of cool workflows. One of which is our knowledge base agent that can take conversations and turn them into knowledge base articles for the rest of our company to see. It's just these levels of enhancing things. It changes the workload. Yeah, it changes what we do every day, but has it eliminated anybody? No, it's only grown us stronger.
That's amazing. Like that's the reframe I think that I want to highlight, because what I'm hearing is like AI is not actually replacing headcount per se. It's changing what the headcount is for, and I love that. So we can talk a little bit about like what n8n actually does for support, right? In the time that you've joined, it's been a year, probably feels like 5. What's changed most about support at n8n as the business continues to scale at such a hyper growth type of speed?
Um, I would just say we've improved. That's the simplest answer, right? We've improved. Our tools have improved. Our documentation has improved. I see a lot of the redundant, mundane tasks being eliminated, and our more junior engineers are now focusing on building our AI to fit simple documentation that we already have in place. We talk a little bit about how processes and procedures and all of those kinds of things come in, and how you teach AI onto those things. And some of our engineers are already transitioning over to doing that, and then some of our seniors are just further in the weeds with AI, right? It's more like partnering together and saying, hey, how could I approach this problem? What could be done here? And AI giving them other ideas or solutions.
Interesting. I like how you put it about like partnering, and it's so important to like work alongside AI. I think that's something that stays with me a little bit, is that I feel like there's so much anxiety in the support world right now that AI is, coming for jobs, and everyone is not going to be doing well because of that. And there will be and there has been a lot of change, right? We have to look at that and accept that that's a fact. Um, you working, inside of an automation company where you're like literally building the tools that are automating these kind of workflows, a lot of them for the support teams as well, right? Like you just mentioned, there's a couple that you can share with us, and I can't wait for that. But just from a personal perspective, like what's your honest read really on what's actually happening, just around the world?
I think it's a large shift in like what we've seen in technology, right? AI is probably the closest thing I can think of is the revolutionary industrial revolution. It's this next major shift of how things are going to be done and operated. But people are still a part of that. People were still a part of the industrial revolution. People adapted and used these things as tools and grew and became more productive and made more things happen with it. And that's exactly what we're seeing on our team. We're seeing our team become smarter. We're seeing our team become more adventurous with the things they attempt to create. They feel more creative because they can break out and use AI to help them solve these incredibly hard tasks and things like that. So, I mean, the landscape is changing, but the perspective on it is what, it depends to each their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to put you on the spot, but any examples or anything that like comes to mind, that is like the most adventurous, right? Like you just mentioned, AI is allowing people to tackle bigger problems. I love that. Anything comes to mind that your team has done it in the past?
Oh, I mean, first thing comes to mind is our frontline AI agent. I have a version of it that I'm going to show you later, and it's insane what our team has done to build this and to make it actually work in a way that is valuable. But that's the cool part of AI is it unlocks this ability to have these robust pieces of software act and work with you in natural language.
100%. Okay, so it sounds like we have a lot of practical things that we can get into. So if you're watching, don't forget to drop your questions in the Q&A on the right side of the screen, so I don't forget to give this reminder too. And I'd love to get a little bit more practical, with you, Rob. Just because in a world with like so much AI noise and new tools every single day, like I would love to just get a sense from you also, like how does your team actually decide like what matters, and what's noise? I know that when we spoke, in preparation for this call, like you mentioned, it was so important to start from process, and I loved talking to you and like learning how your perspective is around that. So I just love to hear your thoughts here and share them with the world too.
So, I mean, when it comes to what to implement with AI, right, there's a couple of different things that we looked at, but I would guess it would really, come down to, what resources are available, right? So for us, there was, what did we have documented? What did we have publicly available? What did we have in community forums? What did we have, in blogs? There's so many different resources for assets for what you can do to teach AI on, right? Repetition would probably be the next thing, right? How frequently were we seeing these kinds of requests? What kinds of requests were they? What kind of technical standing did they really take? And then the third one would be risk, right? So we didn't want to put things into the hands of AI immediately that we didn't battle test and see how it went. So there was a lot of different things that we did for um, you know letting the simpler tasks go through. And then once we had, more challenging tasks like processing refunds and working with our payment gateway, right? We battle tested that through and through until we felt comfortable with it. And then we finally rolled it out. But yeah, I would say the perfect tasks for AI are those kinds of things: resources, repetition and risk.
Hmm. So what I'm hearing is that the question really isn't like about like what does a tool do, right? It's more like what's the problem and can I actually like solve it by implementing like X, Y, and Z, and then like figuring out, how many times can I repeat this so I can learn it, build that trust, and deploy and just have it live. Um, would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, you, like you said earlier, right? It's about starting small, identifying that process, right? Tearing that process down to the most minuscule task that you can define in it, and then slowly, iteratively working through that task until you find each step is perfect. And then saying, okay, yeah, now we've created perfection and we feel confident where we're at, and let's move forward. You know?
Gotcha. So it sounds like AI isn't actually just like doing one job anymore. Like it's doing like an absolute, just like layer of jobs. And it's really interesting because so also when we were preparing for this, like something that you had mentioned is that you guys are using AI in many different scenarios, obviously, but that, you know, like the same AI agent that's serving your customers is also potentially like being internally used by your team as kind of like a natural query layer, right? And and I feel like that's such a good example of how you're looking at different problems and deploying solutions that kind of like overlap, and you're just like trying to figure out like where and how can we like blend it all together in a way, which is really really cool.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really interesting to approach it, right? You know, you have all of this data, and then you kind of attempt to figure out where to unify it at and what to expose where. And it's a very interesting experience, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just on the topic of trust, right? Like how are you creating that? Like how are you sure that the AI that you're deploying is actually like doing a good job?
Right.
And I'd love to just kind of like set this, you know, establish how, and then we can kind of like go into the demonstration that you have because like I feel like that really sets the scene.
Um, I would just say, you know, the way we best do it is to continue to keep humans in the loop, right? You know, the shift, like I said earlier, is not about, you know, eliminating people from support. It's about changing them from being support agents to support agents who train and teach your AI and then monitor your AI, right? Um, we have an entire review process where, you know, our AI agent will even present us with internal documentation and say, hey, this documentation has been waiting for a while and it hasn't been updated maybe in a month or two. It's time for one of you guys to review it. And then we go in, we review it, and then we go in, okay, hey, now it's approved. Now that AI understands it's been approved again, and now it's up to date, you know? But it's about keeping humans in the loop to monitor and maintain and audit these agents. You know, it's not about eliminating them from what they already understand. They have this great knowledge that they've built. Now get them to, you know, implement that with AI and watch over that AI until it gives you back the 100% results that you're looking for, you know?
That's super interesting. Would you say that the support role is fundamentally changing?
Absolutely. I think everybody's role is absolutely fundamentally changing with the shift of AI. You know, I think it's crazy not to think that your job wouldn't be influenced by AI somewhere, somehow, right? But I mean, I think for us specifically, it's only made our support agents stronger, like I keep saying, you know, and giving them that next level of skill and that next level of exposure and that next level up, you know.
Absolutely. I feel like it unlocks so much. And speaking of unlocking, I know that everyone in the audience is probably super curious about how it actually looks like, right? We can talk about theory forever, but actually being able to look at it and seeing, okay, how is n8n actually building support is incredibly valuable. And I know that you've prepared a couple of examples to share with us today. And so Rob, the floor is absolutely yours. And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me bring up a quick screen share. Perfect. So I'll start with just a basic workflow that we use, right? This is a simple workflow that what it does is it checks our Salesforce database, right, for our upcoming expiring licenses for our enterprise features. And then it determines if they're coming up to expire in the 30 days. It comes and sends us an actual notification on Slack, and we create a log inside of our Notion database, right? This is a very simple workflow at n8n, but it saves us numerous hours, right? It helps our teams across customer success as well as support, and it helps everybody keep up to date. You know, it's one of those things that communication is the biggest key factor. And for us, that's where these kinds of things come in all the time. Notification systems, supporting us, telling us, hey, this is what's happening. This is what you guys need to act on. These are kinds of things that are, handled day to day.
Very cool. So
Oh,
sorry. Let me just ask you a question about this one.
yeah.
It sounds like you're building a type of like context layer, right? Like on top of your support platform. In this case, like what were the biggest challenges that you were trying to solve by implementing this type of workflow?
Obviously, keeping up to date with hundreds of thousands of licenses is a constant pain, right? So we had to make sure that we were keeping up with that. For our enterprise clients, we had to make sure that they didn't have any sort of outages or anything like that because their license is expiring. We want to stay on top of things. We don't
Hmm.
want to be a support group that is reactive. We want to be a support group who's proactive, right? That's how you give the best support is making it seem seamless and from the background. And
Hmm.
that's exactly what this was about was, hey, let's keep on these licenses, make sure that nothing happens where they expire, make sure that the customer experience is excellent, and make sure everybody is kept up to date and communicated with in a clear fashion. That's really a couple of the different things we were trying to target.
Gotcha. And basically, you're leveraging data at every step to then kind of like continue the workflow, right? And so if someone today is, looking at this and has never seen n8n, doesn't know what n8n is, can you just give kind of like an overview of like what each of these like little nodes or squares do?
Sure. So the simplest answer, like you said, right, is each one of these squares is a node, right? It is a programmatic action or a something happening with data that's being handled in an input, right? So like you can see here, our very first square is a time clock. And that time clock is a cron job or a scheduled job to happen at a specific time, right? And then these other ones go on to do different sorts of things. So we can see we're doing a configuration here for some data. We're moving on to fetching our licenses out of Salesforce, continuing to manipulate that data or even remove some of the data if we find duplicates, things like that. Finding their contracts, things like that. And then pulling that information together and creating a unified JSON of what that data could look like. And then bringing it into our Notion or sending out messages through Slack. Overall, this is actually a relatively simple workflow for n8n, right? There's no real AI. There's no, it's a workflow automation, not an AI automation, right? So this is relatively, simple stuff that we do. But yeah, that's a quick version of what this one is.
That's awesome. And last question, because it just came in through Q&A. Jesse here was asking if sales ever plugs into this flow to identify potential churn. And I guess that brings up like a good question around like cross collaboration between teams.
We have, workflows for their department, things like that. Cross collaboration across teams. We have all sorts of cross collaboration. Right now I'm leading a cross collaboration between us and primarily the sales department to make a unified source of truth for a lot of different data points. Like you said, creating a context layer for many, many different customers.
Love that. That's awesome. Cool. I'll let you move on to the next workflow.
Sure. This is our frontier AI agent that everybody gets exposed to, right? This is what we call Nate. But as you can see here, this is a far larger workflow. There's a lot more laid out on the canvas. And there's a lot more that goes into this, right? This is what we directly integrate with Plane. And this is what our frontline customers, who the majority of our cloud actually get to see every day. So this workflow services roughly up to 400,000 plus cloud accounts that we have. And anybody who enters a support ticket, this is their AI experience, right? We can see here it's pretty much triggered via webhook. We have it verify the request, get some relevant fields, holds on to some temporary data, goes through and uses GraphQL. We use a lot of GraphQL because of Plane. But yeah, we get some timeline information. We determine where the thread meets specific conditions, right? And then from there, we go on to doing work with different types of AI agents, right? Some AI agents may handle it for if the thread doesn't get assigned properly, or if there's something that may have been said, and then we need to rehandle something. And then down here on this part of the workflow, right? So if we go through and we validate those conditions a different way, we can then find ourselves with our actual frontier AI agent that everybody actually speaks to. And this actually plugs back into, our workflows for cancellation, process refunds, like I said, trial extensions, all that kind of stuff, right? All battle tested and verified that we've made sure everything works. And then we even have our RAG agent down here. So for everybody that doesn't know what a RAG agent is, it's where you develop a database that supports specific information about for your AI agent about a specific topic, right? So ours would be everything about n8n. And then we have another AI agent who works with our account verification, making sure that everything is account verified. And then we have some small tangent spots to do some debugging spots, get back into the plane and to respond and do all those other kinds of things, and then to delete some information. But yeah, this is what supports, like I said, up to almost 400,000 plus accounts, I think is what it is on their cloud.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's pretty amazing what we've done with this one in my mind.
100%.
Go right ahead. You got questions about it?
I have tons of questions about it, Rob. I mean, wow, we're really seeing how the sauce gets made here, which I think is incredible. And a lot of our customers at Plane, they have like similar setups, but maybe they're not like using an automation platform to plug in their own agents. Like they're plugging it in the different ways, which is obviously very interesting. But looking at how you guys like mapped it out, all of the stages, all of the ways that data is interacting with other data and creating like more context, and depending on what happens, then you're sending the customer through specific steps. It's really interesting to see from like a visual perspective, right? So my first question is, who manages this? Who owns this? Is one person or multiple?
No, it's the support team. We have a team of people who work on managing this. Like I said, this is a part of the improvements of changing people from working on support or being the support frontline agent to working on the AI agent. So we have a team that actually works on this and makes sure everything is up to date. We have another subset of people who make sure the documentation is up to date, things like that. So they all play different parts of where the AI agent gets that knowledge, as well as what that AI agent is trained on, as well as how that AI agent operates.
So, and this is a great example of what we were talking about before when we were talking about like how AI is changing the type of work that is left for humans, right? So instead of having a team actually support those 400,000 accounts and sending those messages, you now have a team that is helping to scale that operation by doing all those things that you just mentioned, keeping up with the docs, the processes, making sure that everything is connected and working seamlessly. This is super, super cool. Do you have, so for example, this is customer facing, right? Like at the end of the day, every single customer that asks n8n's team a question, they get a response from this agent. Do you have similar agents that run in the background that are not customer facing and that they do, certain tasks? And if so, what kind of tasks?
Oh, well, you've already led me into my next demo.
Amazing.
This is probably my favorite AI agent we have, which is our document-based agent, right? So KB manages our knowledge base, but KB is a series of workflows, as you can see here, right? It's just not one workflow. It's many workflows that we use, that we connect to many different ingress points from all sorts of different data sets, right? And just bringing together information in different ways. But what makes KB great is KB is fantastic about documenting these different conversations that we have, different data points that we're finding out, knowledge about people and context about people, and bringing them in and keeping us up to date with all of this, right? So the primary function of KB is to search, right? So we use KB internally primarily through Slack. And so what we do is we call on KB, we use in KB's handle, and we say, hey, KB, we're trying to find this documentation about this topic, right? Could be in any sort of natural language kind of sentence, right? And it'll go through and it'll try and retrieve it from any of our forums, any of our customer-facing documentation, any of our internal documentation, any of our blogs, any of our, I mean, the list goes on and on. KB is so well trained on so many sources of data. And then what KB does is it presents it to you and says, this is what I've found, right? And gives you a really cool bullet point list of these are all the different, docs and blogs and articles related to what you're talking about. This may give you your information besides what I've given you here, right? And it goes through and summarizes all that information and puts it together. That's also a part of what the other thing we earlier discussed is about keeping up to date, keeping docs that remind us and things like that, right? So we have an automated review function within KB, right? And this same sort of kind of premise, right? So KB will come in and tell us, hey, I see that this document is stale. I think it's about 30 days since I've last seen somebody touch this. Do an audit, make sure you review it and update it, right? So this is that automated experience of sending a notification where KB actually goes and pulls information from our knowledge base and brings it in and sends it as a message and actually tells us, hey, this is something that you need to know. But we have different data points, our support knowledge base, our n8n documentation, and then our community forums, like I said, pulls in all that different stuff and then brings it to us and says, hey, you're out of date. Checked on this. Somebody posted something on the community forum that relates to this. Maybe it's, it's time to update this documentation, things like that, right? And then this is another feature, right? This is one workflow, and then we have another workflow, which is about where we draft all of that information, right? We go through and we do an automated process of, okay, hey, now you have this information, now you're passing it to KB, and now it's drafting this article. What kind of article is it? What kind of AI agent does that article go to? Is it for internal policies? Is it for external exposure? There's tons of different things that it does. But yeah, it goes in, once again, AI, determines what kind of policies that we're looking for or what kind of things that the article is looking for and what we're trying to do with that article. And then it passes it off and routes it to the right AI agent, who's going to write this thing, what's it about, all that kind of stuff, formatting, but yeah, it's a very intense AI agent. And these are just a couple of the functions of KB.
Wow. That is amazing. Like you've basically built like this entire flywheel of actions, right? That complement each other. Like one searches, one updates, one drafts. Do you have any that publishes? Probably. Of course. One question that I had as you were explaining, it sounds like it looks for information that is outdated, right? Does it also consider, actions taken by the engineering team or the product team, for example? Let's say, PRs that are merged or linear issues that are solved, and then you get a little alert saying, hey, this shipped. We should probably update the Help Center articles.
Those features are lacking in our current version, but we do have a lot of that planned out for our newer version of KB to come. So those are definitely
nice.
We've identified that we're tired of looking at. We're tired of checking for GitHub PRs. We're tired of checking for So yeah, we'll have KB do that for us too.
I hear you, because that's literally what I'm working on right now, and it's pretty much a nightmare to like try to make sure like all of the information flows seamlessly, and this is really where AI can be such an unlock, I would say. This is so cool, Robert. Thank you so much for sharing these three workflows. I mean, I don't even know if KB counts as a workflow, right? Like it's a million of them. I don't even want to think about like how many of these you actually have, like in any, like hundreds, thousands potentially, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just want to spend a little time also in our Q&A, because I see a few questions come in, and I just want to make sure that I can pick a couple and ask you in the last 10 minutes that we have here. Jesse also asked, where do you guys see your product fitting in a less mature org who may not have the budget to stand up a team to run n8n and optimize business processes, specs, and support, which aligns really well with one of the questions that I also had for you here that I haven't touched on yet, which is, a lot of people watching today might be in smaller teams. What kind of advice would you have for them if they were thinking about getting started?
Well, I think for a smaller team, n8n is a phenomenal choice, right? I started it with a smaller team as well. And the availability of how it makes you scale is incredible, right? The majority of n8n itself is a fair code product that is open and free for anybody to self-host and use. So there's nothing that's stopping you commercially wise, and then you roll it out and you try it and you get to see the benefit of it. Specifically working just with workflow automation tools and trying to automate processes in general, I would just say, start small. Start with one step at a time. Make sure you know everything that you need to know, because it's amazing how the most simple task ends up expanding into this long tasks of many small tasks, you know. So I would say, as anybody starting a sport team or anybody trying to scale up a sport team, run in and self-host it, give it a shot, try it out, experiment with it, play and try and figure out what your use case is. Having an idea will give you the furthest direction you'll go, obviously, but knowing what you can and can't do is part of the approach. And when you're brand new to a product, you can't know what you don't know. So I would say try things, try and break the product, try and do something you've never done with AI before with the product. One of the best parts about what we do is we have over 500 plus integrations with n8n that work with AI. So there may be a thought in the back of your mind, oh, I can't plug AI into this platform, but with n8n you can. So I would just tell people to experiment, start small, start slow, and work up and build up to that. But there's incredible exposure you can use on a small team with n8n.
Yeah, it's a huge unlock. And could you also touch a little bit on the fact that, you don't potentially have to trigger n8n to then run the workflow? Like n8n can be triggered from an external service, right?
Yeah, no, n8n has great triggers in it, but they're primarily, if you look at cron jobs, right, things we do repetitive tasks daily or at any specific set of time, right? It doesn't have to be daily. And webhooks, right? An event could happen on any platform, and then you can naturally plug into n8n by using a webhook and then collecting that information and then turning it into an entire workflow.
Exactly. And that's incredibly powerful. Jesse here also had a question about how do you identify repeat issues that were coming up and then weigh which ones to tackle first? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just would say to that one, it's, a lot of how much did we see? Obviously we're tracking and graphing and charting all of these different variables about the data that comes in, right? And so for us, a lot of it's how much repetition is it? How much is it taking away from the team, right? How much more could we do at that time? What other tasks could we put people on? And is it actually a solvable thing by AI, right? Could we put AI in front of this and could it solve someone's problem?
100%. I personally have follow-up questions on what you just said, but I think it's just being respectful of the people that are also asking in the Q&A, because there's a couple here that are super interesting around human interface, like human in the loop. Essentially, you showed us three huge workflows. When and where exactly human intervention is needed in those workflows?
That's real good call out, right? There's a couple of places where it's real specific or explicit, right? Customer says, hey, I want to talk to an agent, right? AI specifically hands off things immediately to them. The other part is the overview, the auditing, the checking and making sure that AI is answering things correctly. We have an audit process, and we have where we check the documentation that the AI learns from. We have an audit process where we make sure that the responses it sent out are appropriate. And we're looking to enhance that even further with AI, because you can train AI to audit AI properly depending on your own, guidelines. But yeah, that's a couple of the spots, and just auditing in general. That's the biggest thing we see the shift in is not doing things, but auditing to make sure they're done correctly.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's also like such an interesting takeaway for me is that obviously with human in the loop, you can set these audits for AI, but first you need to figure out what good is for you, like what good looks like for you, right? And so if you're thinking of starting, like first, strip it back to what actually should it be, and then go and implement it. Would you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. You do need to get that very clear, defined envisionment of what it is you're trying to, accomplish. Because otherwise, yeah, AI can go off the rails. That's what we've seen in the past. But that's why you have to be the person that directs AI and guides them and says, this is the direction that you're going to go in.
100%. And I think this might also kind of segue really well into this question here about KB, which, by the way, great name. Love the workflow name. You've built KB as separate modular functions, draft, search, review, verify, rather than one monolithic workflow. When you're building this for a customer's use case, how do you decide where to split into smaller or separate workflows versus keeping everything in one flow?
It's real easy. It's pretty much task oriented, right? If we know a process or a procedure, we can identify that as a separate workflow, and then we can essentially put it in as a tool for an AI agent to then execute as they need. So that's the easiest way we do it.
100%. And you're setting these based on like outcomes, right? Like making sure that, okay, this one does this one does that, and then you're trying like not to confuse that process, and keeping things like super clear, right?
Yeah, you keep them isolated, so then there isn't a question. It's okay, what do I do down this path? And then I know it. It's just like an employee, right? You bring on an employee, they start to learn the handbook, they learn the processes and procedures, and they know the actions they're supposed to take behind those processes and procedures. Now, what we have in place is we have an AI, which is a piece of software who acts as an employee, right? Who understands the processes and understands when to execute them. And then when they go down those processes, those are the defined guidelines for those steps to follow. Yeah.
Super interesting. Question for me, how has having these processes in place actually impacted new employees' onboarding time?
Oh, it reduces them. It makes things so much easier. When things are documented and having clear guidelines, and this is what I do, this is how I do it, this is the way I do it, it takes away that mental weight of let me figure out X, Y, and Z. So yeah, having processes and procedures are the core of really what it is behind a lot of the stuff we do with AI.
Exactly. I feel like it's such a huge advantage to have everything kind of like at the tip of your fingers, I guess. I don't know what the expression. Yeah. But yeah, just like accessibility, right? Like it just completely empowers someone to go beyond. Like at Plane, we now have like an internal agent that lives in Slack, and you can just ask it questions and it has all context. And so when I have what I think is a dumb question, I no longer have to feel a little, is it a dumb question? Should I ask one of the engineers? I can just be like, hey, Charles, how does this work? And Charles will explain everything to me. And then I can go on about my day, and I just unlocked myself. So I think that's quite amazing, in terms of what can be accomplished, right? So just to also finish here, there was a couple more questions. Anthony was asking, what is the source of truth when things are considered out of date for the knowledge base?
The source of truth is really whatever we have is mainly our Notion database, right? But I would say it's not that it's out of date. We get notifications when we assume something is out of date almost immediately. That's one of the great things, like I said early on in the conversation, we have a lot of systems in place to alert us and to keep aware of things. Once again, auditing things, not necessarily being the builders anymore, but being the auditors of the building.
It's interesting how the role is shifting from doing to observing to having the ability and the skill set to figure out when things are going wrong and to correct, right? That's a whole different skill set for sure. Very, very interesting. Rob, this has been amazing. Thank you. I know that we are at time. I could talk to you forever, but thank you for being so generous with your time and your thinking and sharing all of these workflows with us. I think there's a few moments that I'm going to think back to, and people are going to come back to as well. Like huge takeaways around like distilling things down to processes. It's not really about just like going big or like figuring out what tool can do what. It's really just bringing it back to the basics and saying like what's the problem that I want to solve, and working at it from there, and also making sure that humans stay involved and can help build that trust. Huge reframe for me in the way that like I'm thinking about even the stuff that I build on day to day. Thank you. Everyone, thank you so much for joining as well. The recording will go out to everybody in the next couple of days. If today was useful, share it with your team. We do these conversations regularly through Plane, so keep an eye on our channels, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Rob, thank you again. And everybody, thank you for your time. Take care.
Thanks for having us. Yeah. Bye.
Of course. Thank you.